Hey everyone, this is Jimmy with Spooky Appalachia, and joining me today is my friend Ryan. Say
Hey everybody.
hi. um, so Ryan has sent us a video from Gettysburg that he wanted to share with the channel. Do you want to talk a little bit about what it is, Ryan?
Yeah, absolutely. We, my family and I went to Gettysburg recently. Been there a few times. Interesting place, especially for history nerds, but also, if you have any interest in the paranormal, definitely a lot of hot spots. So, a video I sent, Spooky Appalachia, was on the Jennie Wade House, which is interesting because Um, it's the spot of the only civilian death during the battle, which is kind of remarkable because it occurred in and around the town of Gettysburg, and there was a lot of fighting, particularly on the first day. So it's a place I had never been able to visit before. Finally, was kind of able to visit it. Took sort of a little video before we left. Um, but yeah, and what was interesting too is that our hotel that we stayed in, I didn't know this before, but it literally was right beside the Jennie Wade House,
Hmm.
which was very interesting and a bit spooky. I didn't really realize until the night we got there, and we got there, pretty late at night, about 9, 10 o'clock. And I just happened to see a sign that said something about, you need to park over on this one side next to the Jennie Wade House. And I was like, we're beside the Jennie Wade House. And literally, it's so close, it's almost attached to the hotel. It's
Mm-hmm.
just right there. Um, so a little bit of background, as I said, she was the only civilian death during the battle. So the Battle of Gettysburg, of course, is a big battle during the American Civil War in 1863, um, and essentially all focused around the town of Gettysburg. On the first day, in particular, there was a lot of fighting to the west of town, and then actually through town, because what happened is the Union Army on the first day, it was a pretty major defeat, and fled through the town and kind of fought their way through the town and ended up on the east side, on the other side of town. Um, and a lot of civilians on the first day, and probably the day before too, uh, fled the town. Most people left the town, tried to go to relatives in the nearby countryside, things like that. Some, stayed in their cellars if they had one, until the end of the battle. Jennie Wade, I think her first name is actually Virginia Wade, but she went by Jennie, was a
Mm-hmm.
young woman who lived in the town. She ended up, to try to get away from the battle, she fled to what is now known as the Jennie Wade House, named after her, but it was actually her sister's house. So she left and thought that would be a safer location, which it really ended up not being.
Yeah.
It was a little bit away from the fighting on the first day, but what ended up happening is it literally ended up being between the lines. You had sort of the Southern Confederate lines in the town and around on the western side, and then literally behind it on the eastern side, you had what was called Cemetery Hill,
Mm-hmm.
and the Union lines. Cemetery Hill is named that because the other big feature there is that the local town cemetery was right there, and it was a big focal point of a lot of the battle and fighting too. As a matter of fact, there were many headstones that were disturbed or completely destroyed from bullets and artillery, things like that, which I'm sure was not terrific. So her sister's house was right in that location, and it ended up being that, to, I guess, try to pass the time, instead of hiding out in the basement, which they had one, Jennie decided that she would make bread for the local militia and the Union officers or soldiers. So on the third day of the battle, which was the last day of fighting, she was actually in her kitchen, baking bread. Um, Unfortunately for her, though, in the town, like I said, just down the street, Confederate Army was kind of all around in that area, and they had some sharpshooters and another um, location that's quite haunted, also in Gettysburg, called the Farnsworth House. So Confederate snipers were actually kind of shooting toward the Union lines on that day. This also happened to be the day of the Major Pickett's charge, which a lot of people know, even if they don't know much about Gettysburg or the Civil War. It was a major event during the battle and during the war. So these Confederate snipers were shooting in that direction toward the Union lines, and they believed that there were Union soldiers in Jennie Wade's house, or the Jennie Wade House. And there were a few
Oh,
upstairs,
really?
so they were accurate in that. But in the shooting, and they say that some 200, 300 rounds hit the side, that sort of western facing side of her house. And even today, and in the video we'll see, I
Yep.
kind of tried to get a close-up of some of the bullet holes. There's still just numerous bullet holes all around. But a stray shot as she was making bread ended up hitting the door and going through the door and hitting Jennie in the side. It pierced her heart, went completely through her, and ended up, I think, lodging outside of her body in her corset. It killed her instantly.
Yeah.
So she was the only civilian to die, and I believe the Union soldiers who were in the building ended up taking her body, and they put her down in the cellar. Of course, at that time, everybody realized, like, okay, maybe we shouldn't be breaking bread. We should be hiding out in the cellar. So they all hid in the cellar toward the end of the day. And I mean, it would have been pretty traumatic for her family because they're all hiding down there in the cellar. There's fighting going on. Like I said, the fighting began to intensify because you had Pickett's charge. There was also some fighting on the other side of the field, all around that area on what's called Culp's Hill. And it didn't really end until later in the night, actually. But anyway, her family would have been down there with her corpse for
many hours,
the entire day, pretty much. So it's a very haunted location. I will say that it does give you an eerie feeling. Like, I didn't like being, when we come back to the hotel at night, it was just really weird being anywhere near the house.
Mm-hmm.
You just really got very odd vibes, especially anywhere near the cellar. And during the day, they'd actually have the cellar open, so you could like see down into it. But tour guides, people that go into the house routinely say that like they feel somebody's presence. There've been numerous people that have taken pictures actually inside the house that have captured orbs, particularly in the kitchen area where Jennie Wade fell and died. And there's actually a blood stain in that area, which unfortunately I didn't get in the video. And I think there's even been like EVPs and things like that have been captured. So it was a quick video, really just kind of showing some of the interior, exterior of the house, some of the bullet holes. And then I was able to get a really good shot too of the bullet hole through the door that ended up killing Jennie Wade.
All right, well, let's go ahead and show that.
Hey guys, so I'm here at the Jennie Wade House. It's the house right there. So this is at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. There's a special site at the Battle of Gettysburg here in town. Off in that direction toward the hill were the Union lines, and the Confederate Army was actually back through town in there. Now you can't probably make it out, but on the direction was the Farnsworth house, and there were Confederate snipers shooting off in this direction. So we have the Jennie Wade house again, and there's Jennie. So I can get a picture there in front. Jennie Wade has the distinction of being the only civilian casualty during the battle, but they suspected that Union soldiers were being housed here, and so again, Confederates were shooting off from that direction. And Jennie and her mother were actually in this house baking bread for the Union soldiers, and you can see some of the bullet holes. They claim that it was hit by about 150 different bullets called Manet balls at the time. They were developed by Claude Manet. You can see some in the house there. Jennie was just inside of her house making bread through this door when a bullet happened to go right through there Like, struck Jennie, pretty much killing her instantly. They ended up carrying her down to the basement, to the cellar, where she died. So again, the only civilian death during the battle, and this is considered a very, very haunted spot on the battlefield here where she died. And again, I'll just show you the bullet hole. You can see there, right through into the kitchen there, and that's how she expired. And she's actually buried, so looking back up toward that hill, there's the National Cemetery up near what was called Cemetery Hill, but there's also Evergreen Cemetery, which is the local cemetery, and Jennie is buried there. There's a statue somewhat similar to that one. Her fiance, oddly enough, was a Union soldier who ended up being wounded and dying a few days later. He was not wounded here at Gettysburg. He was wounded in an engagement leading up to Gettysburg, and that's the cellar and where she was carried and died.
Okay, everyone. That was the Jennie Wade House. Pretty cool. Thank you a ton, Ryan, for filming that for us. I'm hoping to get out there one day myself. I have seen stuff on the Jennie Wade House. I had heard of it. I think I've seen stuff saying that's actually the most haunted place in Gettysburg. I don't know. I can't say for sure, but I have heard that. What people say they see or is the spirit of Jennie Wade. They see her in that house. They claim that they see her outside on the battlefield. And apparently the ghost of her father in the basement, I've read.
Yeah, I've heard very similar things. You know, for instance, if you're near the house at certain times, like you can see her in the kitchen. I've heard people say, you know, they've seen her around some of the inns and things like that. Like I said, the hotel we stayed in, which was the 1863 Inn of Gettysburg, is literally right there beside of it. And interestingly enough, I think as I mentioned in the introduction, the original town cemetery is right up the road. I mean, you can go outside of that hotel or stand from the Jennie Wade House and just look up the road and see the cemetery. And there's two now. There's the National Cemetery for you know, for the soldiers, which is why Lincoln, by the way, was there given the Gettysburg Address. It was to dedicate that cemetery. But there was the local cemetery, I think, called the Evergreen Cemetery, that's just up there too, which is where she's buried. So she died at that house, and her grave is literally just not even a block up the road. I mean, you can walk there in like you know, about 5 minutes, probably less than that. And oddly enough, some trivia for you too. She is the only woman buried in America where there's an American flag that flies over her grave 24 hours. I think it's her and Betsy Ross are the only two women.
Oh, do they like on a flagpole?
Yep.
Huh.
So she and Betsy Ross are the only two that have an American flag flying over their grave 24/7. But yeah, you definitely can't miss her grave. There's a huge statue of her at her
There was one in front
graveside.
of the house too.
Yep. It's very similar to the one just right at her house. But yeah, it was an interesting experience. Like I said, it's definitely an eerie feeling place. I also did get a chance to sort of visit the Farnsworth house, where, you know, the enemy soldiers were shooting from as well. It's supposed to be another haunted location, so hopefully sometime in the future I'll get up there again and get a good video of that, maybe for the channel.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, this has been another Spooky Appalachia video. Thank you for watching. And again, big thanks to my buddy Ryan here for scoring this video for us. And thank you all for watching.